Hello, welcome to another English Sparkling with Tweedy video. This today is going to be the last of those wines from Langham, from that mixed case. Was it called the Champions case or something? All of their award-winning wines. I've saved possibly the best until last. Well, I've saved the most expensive till last. I didn't know that Langham had started doing one of these, what I think is called a prestige cuvée, but this is their wine called Perpetual. A Blanc de Blanc. It's all Chardonnay. Interestingly, it's not a single vintage wine. It is actually a blend of three vintages, 2017, 2018 and 2019. As always with these wines from Langham, it's very low dosage, 1.5 grams a litre, and it's pretty pricey. Let's just say this out loud for once. This is a 95 quid bottle of ESW. I would be surprised in the extreme if I actually think this is worth it, because I really liked their Culver, the Pinot Dominant blend, and that was a third of the price, something like that. So there is no way this to me is going to seem 3 times as good as that. But I was interested to try to see what all the hype was about. This received the single highest score at the Wine GB Awards 2025 of every single wine they reviewed, a whopping 99 points. I think they consider this to be almost perfect. I don't know what it dropped that 1 point for. They call this special release Perpetual, and this is the first time they've done this, the first release of that. So presumably this is something they will do again in the future, if idiots like me continue to pay through the nose for it. As a special treat for myself as much as anything, I brought proper glass stemware, which, as I often say, I don't really like doing. I'm just going to be extremely careful with this. I'll put it in a box. I'm on a bench, so it's a flat surface. Hopefully less chance of this getting knocked over, although on the flip side there is a concrete paving slab there. That is what that looks like. Hopefully you can get a decent appreciation of the colour, because as I say, for once, proper stemware. Gold. Straightforward gold, I think. I wouldn't say that's particularly pale actually. It's a certain amount of depth to that. First whiff of the nose before I give this a swirl or anything. It's actually that slightly aged Chardonnay type nose with a sort of buttery hint. I think it's veering kind of shortbready here though. Yeah, buttery shortbread. So I think that's probably going a bit into the autolytic character there as well, but it's some combination of aged Chardonnay. I think it's an oak interaction, isn't it, that can bring out those buttery notes, and that can be overworked. I know people complain about overly buttery Chardonnay. Shortbread, bit of brown sugar maybe, a little bit of a hint of apple, so possibly that shortbread's merging into short crust pastry on an apple pie with a bit of brown sugar on the crust. But that's nice. I would say there is a hint of apple there, but it's not sort of searing fresh green apple. It's more a bit more baked apple. Definitely something pastry-ish, shortbready, buttery, brown sugar. I'm not getting so much of a citrus hint. There might be a little squeeze of lemon juice in that apple pie, but everything there is really nicely combined though as well. All of those elements to the nose are a kind of continuation of the same thing, which is nice. So it does have this kind of feel of a sort of baked apple pie, the finished product, rather than the individual ingredients. Give that a bit of a swirl, see what happens. A little bit livelier after the swirl. Perhaps a bit of fresh apple is coming in there, and a little bit of lemon sherbet and or lemon sorbet, possibly both. That's all pretty nice actually, and this is actually quite different from the regular Blanc de Blanc I tried the other day, and also quite different from the Langham Corallian, their classic cuvée that is mostly Chardonnay. So I've tried one other entirely Blanc de Blanc, one other 100% Chardonnay, and another which was majority Chardonnay, and this is definitely gives a bit more of a sense of a more sort of aged, more well integrated sort of wine, at least on the nose. On the palate there, really nice balance, I would say. Definitely a bit of zing, appley or maybe lemony zing, but Not quite as acidic as perhaps the other two that were Chardonnay dominant. A little bit more, trying to think of a positive word, restrained sounds boring. Slightly more mellow, slightly more, everything's kind of calmed down and a bit more integrated here, a bit more aged. I think there are more citrus notes I'm noticing there on the palate. Bitter citrus complexity, something slightly exotic in that sort of, I don't know, we're veering a little bit into Japanese citrus fruits, yuzu, something like that, because of that slight bitterness. It's not grapefruity. A sort of bitter citrus character there, which is quite appealing. Quite a long finish to that. Quite dry. Actually quite zingy, I'm noticing now, and quite mineral. It's nice. That is, it's all very well integrated, all quite polished. Do I think it's worth 3 times the classic cuvées? I'm almost certainly going to say no, aren't I? At least to begin with, I feel like the nose and the palate give quite different fruit expression, actually. I was noticing much more apple and apple pie, and I suppose that's the autolytic character coming to it as well on the nose, but much more sort of bitter citrus on the palate. That's not necessarily a bad thing that they don't agree, but sometimes when you get that kind of apple pie sensation on the nose, that follows through onto the palate. The Kit's Coty Cœur de Cuvée from Chapel Down was like that, and some of those Hampshire wines like Hattingley Valley can be like that, quite intense apple pie. Don't really get the same kind of intensity on the palate here. That might be a facet of this being very low dosage. It tends to go a bit more pensive and mineral and dry on the palate rather than intensity. Usually is something that comes from a lot of sweet and sour sort of character, I think. So these low dosage wines, less likely to do that intense sort of palate. I thought it would be interesting again to read the WineGB 2025 Awards tasting notes for this wine as a recap. 99 points out of a possible 100, presumably. This was the highest scoring wine, best in show. A soaring world-class example of grower style sparkling wine. Bright red apples and crunchy yellow pears. Presumably that's talking about the nose here. So yeah, I think I picked up apples initially. Not sure about the pears, but orchard fruit broadly. With a subtle toastiness, that's what I was detecting, I suppose, as more pastry or shortbread. Short crust pastry or shortbread. Palate is reminiscent of blanched almonds. They're a bit obsessed with nuts, aren't they? All of those Langham wine tasting notes from WineGB 2025 ended up talking about nuts one way or the other. Can I detect the nuts here? Let's try. Maybe. Possibly briefly thought about cashew nuts there. I used to quite like those lemon pistachios, lemon, some sort of lemon flavouring on the shells, and you kind of suck the shells and then eat the pistachios, and perhaps a tiny, tiny hint of that, but only once the thought has been put in my head. Elegant brioche and baked apple aromas. Perhaps that first fruit note wasn't talking about the nose then so much. But yes, I think we've definitely agreed. I haven't read these before, actually, these tasting notes, so it's good to see we agree on the baked apple there, definitely. Talked about apple pie, didn't I? Long finish, pretty dry. I agree, it's pretty dry, albeit with some lovely creamy autolytic texture and a saline yeasty complexity. So that's possibly touching on what I was saying about, I thought, sort of bitter citrus kind of notes, that kind of bitter complexity. Yes, it's certainly nice, and I think I do roughly agree with at least some parts of their tasting notes, but it wasn't really clear to me which part of that description made it a sort of standout, amazing smash hit of a wine. And most of those things that they touched on in there, apart from perhaps the almonds, I found in other wines that I think have probably done that in a slightly more extreme, slightly more intense way. As mentioned earlier, I think those sort of baked apple pie kind of notes, you get that in Chapel Down's Kit's Coty Cœur de Cuvée, although that was a bit disappointing last time I had it in those Hampshire wines. The bitter citrus complexity is something that is a bit of a trademark of Dermot Segrew's wines, the Trouble with Dreams series, and I could think of other examples for both of those styles. So I mean, perhaps it's interesting that this is doing kind of both here. We got a little bit of a flash of apple pie on the nose, and then later we get that kind of drier, more perhaps even botanical, sort of gin-like or tonic water-like bitter complexity and more citrus character on the palate. So definitely good. I will agree, this is good. It's a very nice expression of Chardonnay. There's a lot of finesse to that. It's all, as I say, very nicely integrated and does have a few different interesting things going on. But for me, certainly the wine I would most strongly recommend from that mixed case is the Culver, the Pinot dominant blend. In terms of bang for the buck, value for money, that was £34, was it? Basically a third of the price of this. That is of course biased by the fact that I prefer those Pinot dominant styles rather than these Chardonnay dominant, or in this case 100% Chardonnay styles. Second favourite after that, maybe the Pinot Noir 2019. Well, maybe the Pinot Noir 2019 was subtly nicer than the Culver, but I don't think it was worth the hike in price. I've enjoyed all of these. They've all been good and interesting in their own way. But you know, if you wanted my recommendation for a wine from Langham, and if you, like me, tend to like those Pinot dominant styles with stone fruit character, I think Culver is a great wine, good value for money. This is very interesting as a one-off, but I think next time I'll perhaps spend that money on almost 3 bottles of Culver instead. Have I said enough? I don't know. I'm going to go and enjoy a couple more glasses of this on a different bench with a bit more of a view now, where I can be more conspicuous and not have to hide in the woods. Cheers.